My name is Dr. Jessica Wirtz. I am a PTSD clinical psychologist for the Phoenix VA.
If anyone has like any questions or anything, just in the meantime until we get started, feel free to put them in the chat, and yeah, we'll answer those questions. Okay, Andrea has a question about suggesting children's books regarding the topic of this breakout session.
Yeah, I do have some at the very end. I don't know if you can jump to that very end slide, Tristan. It would be slide 27.
Let me just stop sharing and then jump to there. You said slide 27?
27, yep.
Awesome, right here. Sweet.
And hopefully, I don't know if there'll be a way to kind of send out these slides too, just because I think there's good references in there. But yeah, unfortunately, I do think that a lot of the books have dad as a representation of who is in the military, and we definitely know that that is not the case. But Daddy's Home is a good one. It's a picture book geared towards more smaller children. Sparrow is also a board book for young children. Why Is Dad So Mad by Seth Castle is like more for like, younger children. Why Is Daddy or Mommy Like He or She Is, a book for kids about PTSD, is also, for children ages 4 to 8. Why Are You So Scared? A child's book about parents with PTSD by Beth Andrews. That's geared towards a little bit of an older child, 6 to 10. And then if you have a teenager, there's Finding My Way, a teen's guide to living with a parent who's experienced trauma. It's geared for more ages 12 to 20. So those are some good starting places.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I didn't know that there were children's books for this. You make a great point, Andrea. This is a really great way to like start that conversation. All that.
Exactly. And, I think for kids, seeing kind of it represented in pictures and giving them some more concrete ways to think about it is really helpful. I'll also mention it too, but Sesame Street has also a great website as well as some videos geared towards military families. So that also is great because a lot of kids already know these characters and can relate to them. So it feels comfortable to kind of hear it coming from these characters that they grew up and love. So that's another great one. It's on slide 28, the next slide. That second bullet, Sesame Street's Talk, Listen, Connect series. But if you just like put in Google like Sesame Street military families, you should be able easily to find the website.
Yeah, we'll just get started here in a few minutes. We still have some more people hopping in. Thank you, Andrea, for suggesting that. That's great. Yeah. And I will stop sharing so we can not look at all the slides. So there's still a surprise. Awesome. Sweet. Yeah, it's 10 o'clock now. There's no one in the waiting room right now. So again, I'm Tristan Chavez. I'm the communication specialist for the Arizona Coalition for Military Families, and I'll be the facilitator for this breakout session. which is called Stormy Days: How to Talk About PTSD with Your Children. Just before we get started, a few housekeeping things. First things first, your presenter will be the wonderful Dr. Jessica Wirtz. At the end of the session, I will place 2 links in the chat. One is for a survey, and the other one is for a link to return to the closing general session. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to type them in the chat, and I'll bring them up towards the end of the session or as prompted. With that said, Dr. Wirtz, you can take it away.
Great. Thank you so much for having me here today. And thanks for joining this breakout session. Hopefully I can give some general information that will be helpful in terms of how to talk to children about PTSD. My name is Dr. Jessica Wirtz. I got my doctorate degree from Loma Linda University, and I've been working with the VA for 10 years now. I grew up in a military community around a lot of other children who had parents who were in the military. My grandfather was a Korean War vet. So I've just kind of seen how, PTSD can sometimes impact children. I am also a newer mom myself, and learning how to kind of help children understand emotions, understand kind of what's going on. I can understand it is a difficult task at times, and so hopefully we can just kind of be open today about sharing, if you decide to talk about PTSD, how you might talk about PTSD with your children. I will sometimes kind of use words or terminology that it's a little bit more simplistic or broken down. That's because that is how it makes sense to children. They don't have the language that we all have as adults to understand it. It is by no means to minimize the pain and suffering that can come sometimes with PTSD. It's just this is a way that kids learn. So I just kind of wanted to put that caveat out there to start. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So some days, frustration has nothing to do with PTSD and can be just the normal stress of parenting. Parenting is a very challenging job and will test you, your emotions on good days. But on other days, when you're managing memories of PTSD and the strong feelings that come with those memories, it can make dealing with your children even more challenging. I'll start by, sharing kind of some examples from real life vets and how they found that their PTSD has impacted their children. So this first story is about Joe. Ever since his deployment to Iraq, Joe has dealt with serious depression related to PTSD. Just taking care of his daily activities zaps his energy. Doing anything other than relaxing on the couch is overwhelming. His children have noticed that dad rarely plays with them anymore, so they usually don't ask him to join their activities. They miss the dad that he used to be, and he doesn't laugh, joke, and tease with his kids anymore. He seems zoned out much of the time, and his kids always go to their mom when they have a problem or need to talk. Ever since being assaulted, Margaret has been very uncomfortable in large groups and crowds. She and her partner typically do their grocery shopping very late at night, or sometimes her 17-year-old son will pick up groceries after school. Margaret's been unable to sit through her daughter's basketball games this season, but being in large crowded gyms makes her anxiety worse. Recently, Margaret's daughter's been asking to go shopping together for a prom dress. However, Margaret feels anxious even thinking about the idea of walking around a busy mall where so many things could trigger her. All right, I just have one more story to share. Steve's wife had their first child during his Afghanistan deployment. He was very excited to meet and spend time with his new daughter. However, part of Steve's PTSD makes it hard for him to feel any emotions at all. He just feels numb most of the time. Steve doesn't know how to relate to his daughter and doesn't feel the instant love he thought he would. He wonders, what's wrong with me as a dad? So I share these, hopefully to let you know that you're not alone, that, again, parenting can be challenging when you're dealing with PTSD. But that doesn't mean that you can't still forge a really special relationship with your children. That doesn't mean that your children can't grow up to, be very healthy adults themselves. It just might take, some time working with mental health professionals in order to, figure out how to talk through this with your children and how you can be there for them. But we'll also be discussing some strategies that you can use too in this presentation. All right, next slide. So the first decision that you have to make is, should I tell my kids about PTSD? There's no right or wrong answer when it comes to this, and it's a very personal decision. It's entirely up to you, and what you think would be most helpful for your children and for your family. You can go to the next slide. It looks a little jumbled here, but I can read this to you. But one strategy that you might want to start out with is writing down the pros and cons of why you might want to share with your children about PTSD and why you might not want to share with your children about PTSD. So this is a real life example from a veteran named Marcus. So under the pros column, he said, my kids tend to blame themselves for everything, even little stuff. I wonder if they think they did something wrong to cause me to have PTSD. I'd hate them to worry about that. I know my behavior scares my kids sometimes. They just don't understand why I fly off the handle over little things and spend so much time playing video games or watching TV. Our kids responded pretty well when we talked to them about their grandpa's diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. I could tell them that something was going on with grandpa and they appreciated this information. Maybe this will be similar. Under the cons column, he wrote, I don't even fully understand PTSD myself. How can I explain it to someone else? I have absolutely no idea what to say to my kids. I don't want to burden or upset my kids. I don't want to worry my kids might judge me. And ultimately, after discussing it with his mental health professional, he did decide to go ahead and share his PTSD with his children. Another vet who shared PTSD with his children also commented, you got to find a way to communicate with them. No matter how old or young they are, they can have an idea of what they've been through. And Andrea is commenting that, children often want to please their parents. In my experience working with the children, they often blame themselves for their parents' struggles. Exactly. And I think that is why it oftentimes can be really helpful to have these discussions with kids. And again, if your cons are more around, I don't know how to do it, that can be really easily fixed. Again, there are a lot of resources we'll go over today. Again, utilizing mental health professionals to discuss this through. Hopefully we'll give you a little bit more confidence on how to do it. So how do you prepare to have these conversations with your children if you have decided that, it's something that you're wanting to do? So you want to consider what you want to share about your PTSD. It might be even helpful to write down some notes to use during the discussion, because when you're talking about it and those emotions get high, it can sometimes be hard to remember what you wanted to say. So writing down notes can help remind you. You'll want to figure out how much detail to share. We'll talk a little bit more about how to decide what details to share as we go on in this presentation. But you may also want to realize that this won't be a one-time conversation. Rather, you'll regularly want to open the discussion and encourage your child to ask questions and share their feelings. So not feeling pressure that you have to, give them everything at once. You might also want to decide if you'd like another adult present. You might develop a plan with your partner or a friend or a family therapist before talking with your kids, and having an adult present can help the conversation go more smoothly, especially if your emotions kind of get overwhelmed and you feel like you'll need a break. That way another adult can kind of sit with the child until you're ready to come back, and also just give that kind of moral support. You also want to think about how you're going to manage your emotions if you do become upset. If you feel overwhelmed, you could do some deep breathing, you could take a walk, or let your kids know that you need a break. If you do need a break, it's just important to let your children know that you will return soon, and that you're okay, and that you'll be able to kind of come back and talk about it. Again, that can be why sometimes having another adult there can be helpful. Okay, next slide. Next, you'll probably want to do some practice. So you'll want to think about, again, what you'll want to say ahead of time. And it kind of seems funny, but when the emotions get intense, the words can go quite right out of your head. So maybe talking about it in front of a mirror, practicing with a trusted adult or a partner or friend. You can even make a recording of what you want to say and play it back to see how it sounds. You can use things like your phone's voice recorder function. Again, this will kind of help you know, like maybe when difficult emotions are going to come up, or challenging areas, and how you want to, handle that, or to kind of anticipate that ahead of time. You can go to the next slide. So you want to think about timing, especially when it comes to kids. You'll want to make sure that your child's not especially tired, hungry, sick, grumpy, or having a bad day themselves. When they're, having a lot of emotional reactions, it can be hard when you're kind of having a lot of an emotional experience to manage both of those, and they just might not receive the information. I'm sure that you know your kids really well, and you'll probably kind of know like what time is good for them. Like 5 o'clock for my son, it's like the witching hour. He's bouncing off the wall, so probably wouldn't be the best time. If you have an older child, like especially a teenager, you may want to consider scheduling it in advance so your teenager can feel prepared or blindsided, or they don't feel like I'm supposed to be talking with my friends, or I have a big game, so they're not distracted. You want to realize that kids are going to ask questions. I'll talk a little bit more about how to handle questions later, but you're going to want to build in time for them to ask questions. Also, some kids might feel kind of more comfortable asking questions or having this discussion while they're doing an activity. So you might want to kind of plan an activity to do together after you have this discussion, like maybe going on a drive or making dinner together or working on a project. This can allow them to feel more space to feel comfortable to talk. And again, children sometimes are better when they're actually engaged in an activity to open up with their emotions. One big important caveat, if you're kind of feeling like, should I or should I not talk to them about PTSD, it's important to realize that you do not need to tell your children about the trauma or about the details of the trauma in order to talk about your PTSD and how you're doing now. The decision about if and how much to tell kids about the trauma is complicated and personal, and it might depend on the child, and it might depend on the circumstances of the trauma. For certain traumas, your child may be aware that something happened, like your child may be aware that you were deployed to a combat zone or you were in a car accident, but not know the certain details, or your child might not know that you had any traumatic experience happen to you. So things about, to consider when you're thinking about whether to share details of the trauma is that your child's age at the time of the trauma, your child's current age, the amount of time since the trauma has happened may also affect their understanding. I think with this one, it is really helpful to talk to a trusted professional and friends about disclosing the trauma itself to children. Again, sharing kind of graphic details or pictures or videos might be a little too scary for them or too much for them. So you might want to kind of think that through. But regardless of the decision you make about how much details to share with them, you can still talk about how the PTSD has impacted you. And that can be really helpful for them to understand, because all they see are these behaviors, and they might not understand why those behaviors are occurring and are making kind of incorrect assumptions about why that's going on. So next slide. All right, so say that you've decided to share about how PTSD has been impacting you. How do you go about doing this? So first, you'll want to start slowly. You'll likely talk about these issues many times, so you don't have to cover everything at once. This will help your child not feel overwhelmed and also help you not feel so overwhelmed as well. You want to listen more than you talk. So after you give a little information, allow your child time to ask questions and check in with their feelings. You'll want to check in regularly. So you'll want to ask your children what they have heard and what they've understood. Again, this might be a time to help your child, like help you kind of correct maybe how your child's misunderstood things. It can be really common, again, because they don't have that language or emotional understanding or processing. So maybe they might heard, oh, this is my fault. And you'll definitely want to kind of jump in and correct that if you hear, if they've misunderstood things. So, but we have to kind of touch base with what our children is understanding regularly. And we want to really consider the developmental stage of your child. So, very young children often have short attention spans, like maybe a couple of minutes. So we're not going to be able to sit down for an hour and kind of talk through everything with them. They may need to kind of come back again and again and again to kind of hear the information in shorter spurts. Teenagers have longer attention spans, but they often, especially when they feel kind of emotionally overwhelmed, might kind of act like they're not paying attention, even if they are. And again, that's very developmentally appropriate. And that doesn't mean that they don't care or that you're not connecting with them, or that to take it personal. We'll talk a little bit more about that too as we go on. You'll want to use age-appropriate language. So you'll want to avoid jargon or technical terms. So you might want to use phrases like having a hard time sleeping or feeling scared, instead of saying things like I'm having insomnia or hypervigilance. Again, I have some books at the end that range in age, like from children's books all the way to teenagers. So you maybe you would want to kind of get one of those books and look at how it's being described in those books, and that might help you tailor kind of the language to your child. You'll want to speak in a calm tone of voice and try to avoid expressing strong emotions, especially with young children. Again, young children don't always understand that, when they see a strong emotion, they might think that they're kind of causing that strong emotion, or not understand how to regulate it. Again, I know that this is incredibly challenging to talk about, and it can bring up a lot of emotion. So if you do get choked up or overwhelmed, it's okay to take a break, and just letting your kids know, mommy and daddy might need a little bit of a break. Let's play a game, or let's do an activity together, and then I'll finish talking to you about it later. Just the key is you'll want to let your child know that you will come back and talk about it later. If you don't come back and talk about it later, again, that might not be able to understand why that's happened, and they might internalize that or blame themselves. And again, you'll want to find that good balance in how much to share. So some information can be helpful, but describing graphic details about exciting events or showing scary videos can frighten children. So silence can be scary for children, but too much information can also be scary for children. So you'll want to kind of figure out that middle road. And again, everyone's story is a little bit different. That's why you might want to talk with professionals, teachers, friends, to kind of figure out for your specific story or experience what the right balance is. So how to begin? So you might kind of want to use some of these phrases. I'd like to talk with you about some tough things I'm dealing with right now. Just as I ask you to be open and honest with me, I want to share something personal with you. Or you might say, I've been a bit crabby or tense or down or grumpy lately. I want to tell you a little bit about what's going on for me. And then you'll want to actually, talk about the PTSD and give it a name. So I have something called PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, which develops after an upsetting event. It can affect how I think, feel, and behave. So again, you're keeping it brief, but you're also giving it a name. This will help the child understand what it is. Depending on your child's age, they may have already learned some things about PTSD. They may have talked to friends at school, or searched for information on the internet, or read books about it. And although such general information can be helpful, each person's experience of PTSD is different, and there's a lot of inaccurate information about it. So you may also even want to check in with what your child knows about PTSD, or if they've heard about it, and then potentially kind of help them understand how it impacts you versus what they've seen or heard from other people. You can go to the next slide. Yep. You'll want to explain that you experienced an upsetting event, but won't necessarily be sharing the details. And here's how you might do it. You might say, when I was in Iraq, I had a bad experience that still bothers me today. Or a long time ago, I had a really scary thing happen to me. When I think about it, sometimes I feel upset. I won't be sharing the details with you because talking about this event is hard in my life with you and our family. I'm working on moving forward in my life with you and our family. And I hope that knowing about PTSD and how I feel will help you understand me better. You'll want to describe some of the problems you manage as part of your PTSD. So you might want to say things like, I worry and feel tense a lot. It's hard for me to relax. I know sometimes I'm crabby and snap at you even when you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes my PTSD means I get angry quickly. You might also want to describe it in a way that they might understand or kind of equate it to a physical illness because it is similar. So remember when you had the flu and spent a lot of time on the couch, when I don't feel well, I sleep a lot too. When I don't sleep well at night, I'm extra tired the next day. You might also want to talk to them about why, you might not be able to go to certain events or kind of be in certain places, again, so that they understand it's the PTSD and not necessarily anything that they did or that you don't love them. So do you remember that I didn't go see the fireworks with the family on the 4th of July? Sometimes loud noises are hard for me. Sometimes I don't go to church with the family. I have a hard time in large groups. Part of my PTSD is that I feel uncomfortable in big groups. And I think this is really the most important part. Again, details are not so important, but how it's impacting you now and linking that with the PTSD. And that might kind of take repetition. So again, the child understands, oh, when they're angry, it's not me, it's the PTSD. It's just like when I get the flu. Another thing is that you'll want to, express how the PTSD has been impacting your child and to give them space to talk about their own emotions. This isn't, this can be hard to do because I know sometimes parents will kind of internalize this and be like, this is the last thing I want for this to be impacting my child. And again, this doesn't mean that, they won't be able to heal or recover from this themselves, that you won't be able to heal and recover this themselves, that you still won't be able to have a meaningful relationship with your child, but that it is tough for them too, and that it does impact them. And it's no one's fault, not kids or your fault. So, you want to express that you recognize that PTSD has been tough for a child. So I feel badly I haven't been able to attend your baseball games this season. I know it was tough for you when many other parents came. You want to support your child, emphasize that you'll be there for them and that they can feel safe talking with you about how they feel. Just because I miss some of your events doesn't mean that I don't love you. I love you very much and try to show it in other ways. And I'd be happy to kind of talk with you about that if you need it. And you'll also want to emphasize this teamwork. You're working on this together as a family, and this can help, them feel like they have kind of more control, or that things are kind of getting better and that we're working on this together. Just like we all came together when grandma got sick, we can all work together to deal with this in our family. We're a team. I've talked about this a little bit already, but you might want to compare managing PTSD to other health problems because it is a health problem, and again, kids, because they're a little bit more concrete in their thinking, might understand a physical problem better than a mental health problem because they can't see it. But if you link the two in their head, then it makes more sense to them. So you might want to say something like, after your sister broke her ankle playing soccer, she went to the doctor, took medicine, and did physical therapy. Managing my PTSD is a lot like that. Sometimes I go to the doctor, I take medicines, and attend classes and therapies. And kind of linking those two things together might help the child understand it better. You'll want to emphasize to your child that there is hope and that you are getting help so that the child doesn't feel like they have to kind of fix the problem for you. Children always want to fix the problem, always want to help you feel better, but they don't have the capacity emotionally or cognitively to do that. So if they feel like it's all on them, it creates kind of a challenge developmentally for them. So you want to make sure that they don't feel like it's on them to fix you and that you're getting help. So, you might want to say, just like, again, if you go to the doctor when you get a boo-boo, I'm going to the doctor to help with my PTSD. You'll want to really emphasize that it's not anyone's fault. as we've talked about, children are very perceptive because it's how they learn about the world. They're sponges, they're soaking everything up, but they don't always understand things the way adults do. So they notice that something's wrong, and the only thing that seemed to change is that they're there. So it's important to let them know that it's not their fault and that you love them. And it's also important to let them know that it's not your fault either. You got hurt doing your job. I pulled a video from Sesame Street workshop. It obviously is geared for young kids, but I do think it was a kind of a great video showing kids that it's not their fault. So I don't know, Tristan, if you can click on the link or if you want me to share the video. Oh, and the sound isn't working, I don't think.
So it might just be better if
I share it. Yep.
Yeah, because we got it to work for you earlier.
Yeah. Sorry, let me pull it up. Okay, let me share my screen. Oh, can you make me the co-host? Okay.
Yeah.
Baby David thinks so too.
Ooh, me too. Now it's Elephant's turn to add another block.
Okay.
Boom, 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 boom. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Oh, well, now she's sad. It's all my fault.
It's okay. We were just playing.
Well, I don't know, Elmo. Maybe she feels worried like I used to feel. My mom said sometimes things happen that little monsters can't control or fix, and that those things aren't their fault.
And it's not Elephant's fault either.
Yeah. I used to feel like a lot of things were my fault, especially my mom's problem. But she told me no, it was a grown-up problem. It wasn't because of anything I did. And she said that she loves me no matter what.
Yeah. Well, Elmo loves Carly too. Oh, and so does Baby David. No matter what.
I love you too, Elmo and Baby David.
Oh.
Oh, look. I think she's feeling better now.
Come on, Elephant. Let's build the castle.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. Elmo will help so we get this block here.
Okay. So I do think that video is really good, especially for young kids, because it shares it in a way that kids understand. They will often express themselves through play. So you saw Elmo and his friend kind of playing with the dolls and expressing how the dolls felt, but usually that's a representation of how they feel. And then they were able to work out the problem through the dolls, and that made sense to them. So again, this might be a good video to kind of show, especially if you have little ones and they know kind of Elmo. And so sometimes it can feel comforting kind of hearing it from them. Again, Sesame Street Workshop has a lot of great videos out there around military topics and non-military topics. So I encourage you also to kind of look at that website, which also is referenced at the end. Sorry, let me get back to my notes. Okay, so another thing that we want to do is we want to encourage children to share their concerns and feelings, and we want them to feel comfortable sharing them with us. if we don't explicitly say that, kids sometimes will hold them in. And, just like holding in our feelings is not good for our PTSD recovery, holding in feelings when we're kids is not great either. So always kind of starting out conversations or ending conversations with, please come to me whenever you want to talk. I want to hear your feelings and questions, and I will do my best to help you. You might also let them know that there may be times that, it's going to be hard for you to kind of hear their emotions or questions. And that you may need to kind of take a break or may need to, have a trusted adult come in to talk with them about their emotions, but that no way means that, they're to blame or they shouldn't talk about their emotions. And that when you are feeling kind of better, to come back and then give them the space to talk about those emotions. So just in review, you'll want to, we can go to the next slide. You'll want to label what's been going on. I have PTSD, it's post-traumatic stress disorder. It affects thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. You'll want to talk about how PTSD affects everyone in the family, including children. You'll want to say that doctors and counselors can help our family get through this tough time. We aren't alone, and treatment can help me manage and recover from PTSD, so there's hope. We want them to know that they're not to blame for PTSD, and we want them to know that it's okay for them to share their feelings with you and that you're there to support them. So, those are kind of the building blocks, but there can be a lot of nuances that can come in that can make this challenging. So I'm going to spend some brief time talking about that. So what do you do if you get upset when talking with your kids about PTSD, which is very understandable, very normal. The problem is, like we mentioned, that really big emotions, especially for little kids, can be, tough for them to understand. So if you become overwhelmed and feel strong emotions, you may just want to take a brief time out and go into another room. Again, this is brief, and, going back in when you feel ready is going to be really important. And talking through maybe with your counselor, mental health professional, what you do during that break to kind of help. So you might want to take some deep breaths or talk to a trusted friend, or do, mindfulness or relaxation exercises, whatever you've kind of learned in your therapy. If another adult is available, you may ask them to spend time with your child. Another way to kind of do this, if you're worried about feeling intense emotions, is to do an enjoyable activity while you take some time for yourself, or you can do it together. So maybe giving a kid, a coloring book, or maybe sending them to the Sesame Street website. There's like some fun games and activities for them to do while you kind of collect it, or you guys can do it together. And those activities are nice because they are geared to kind of help handle strong emotions. So it might be helpful for you and for your child. When you have regrouped, it is important to reconnect with your child and let them know that you're okay, that you're ready, and that you having that strong emotion had nothing to do with them. It's just a part of your PTSD. And then what to do if your child becomes upset during the discussion. So you'll want to watch for signs. They aren't always apparent in children. Common signs are crying, but they can also do the opposite, becoming quiet or withdrawn, looking scared. They might change the topic. They might engage in another activity if they're feeling overwhelmed. You'll want to tell your child it's okay to have strong feelings and encourage them to express their feelings. Sometimes when we see children cry, it can be triggering for us. We never want, to feel like our children are upset or that we're causing them to be upset. But crying is a really natural, normal way to express emotions. And, if a child needs to do that, we want to let them know that it's okay to do that. Doesn't mean that they're weak or that it's bad or just to get over it. Just like, we know with PTSD that it's important to express emotions. So they just might need, a little bit of comfort. And you know your child best, but comfort them in whatever way feels best for them, not for you, but for them. So young children may need to be held or hugged. Again, I know that sometimes can be challenging when we have PTSD, but that can be really important for them. So just giving a hug or providing them some touch or rubbing them on their backs. Older children may want to do an activity together or have some alone time. Just kind of give them the space to do that if they need. You might want to make it a teaching moment so you can share some of the things that you've learned when you have strong emotions. You might want to do a mindfulness exercise together, or do some deep breathing, or teach them grounding. Pay attention to my 5 senses. What are you seeing right now? What are you hearing right now? So you can share with them what you've learned when you have strong emotions. And again, if a child cries, let them. That's a really important part of the healing. So going back to including your child in the recovery process, here are several exercises you can do with your children that will help them learn how to express emotions without avoidance, and will help you learn maybe how to express emotions without avoidance. And again, they're geared, for children that are maybe in the kind of preschool child range, these ones, or young child, but there I have some resources for teenagers too at the end. How to deal with questions. So children are going to ask questions. That is a major task of childhood, and it's helping them learn about the world. I mean, why can be kind of their favorite phrase there for a while. And sometimes children are going to ask questions based on things they've seen on TV or in the movies, or heard it from their friends. And these questions may not be appropriate, and they might be triggering. Sometimes they also might ask some tough, difficult questions like, why did you change, or why can't you go to my games anymore? So if you go to the next slide, so how do you deal with these questions? So know that you don't have to have all the answers, or you might not be able to give an answer in the moment. So you can always choose not to answer a child's questions if you're not ready or don't know what to say. You might just say to your child, that's a really difficult question or answer, and I want to make sure that I say it in the right way. So I'm going to think about it, and I'll let you know. And maybe you want to talk about it with your therapist or with your friends about how to handle it. At other times, children are generally asking questions because they want to help but are unsure of what to do. So they might ask, what can I do to help? Or that might be the intention of their question. So it's important to remind them that it's not their job to try to fix you. You have professionals that help you, but you can, maybe suggest some small things they can do that can be helpful. Really, it would be helpful right now if I could just have a hug from you, or if you could send me a sweet text or a funny text, or, if you could read me a book. I love when you read me, your Dr. Seuss book. Can we sit down and read that together? So just giving them some small things can help them feel like they have agency in this. And how can you continue to be an effective parent while you're on your PTSD journey? It's really, important to dedicate time and energy to strengthening your relationship with your child. Again, this doesn't have to be hours and hours, but just maybe spending a few minutes one-on-one with your child, even when you're busy. Select an activity that you enjoy doing together. Like if you like reading books, read a book together, riding bikes, or playing a board game. Consider how you can nurture your child's strengths. For example, if your child likes playing math, you might want to consider playing Monopoly. Even when you're struggling with depression or anxiety, or PTSD, can be really important to keep up those normal family routines and rituals. Children really feel most secure when they have a routine, when they have something to kind of count on. So trying to kind of engage in those as much as possible, even though it might be hard with that depression and anxiety. If you can only attend for a short time or stand in the back, showing up to your child's activities is going to be important. Again, this can help with your PTSD too, because we know avoidance is going to make PTSD worse. But, if you do feel overwhelmed and need to leave, maybe taking your own car, if that feels more comfortable, but really trying to push as much as possible to get to child's activities. You want to stretch yourself to both give and receive love when interacting with your child. Apologize when appropriate. This can be good modeling too for your kids. Again, it's normal for parents to lose their temper at times with children. And again, it makes it harder when you're struggling with PTSD. Most kids are really forgiving. So after you're calmed down, go to your child and apologize for how you've handled the situation. If you have lost your temper, you may wish to express that you're working hard on managing your feelings in a better way and don't intend to hurt them. It can be helpful if you spend maybe some quality time with your child to get your relationship back on track, such as playing a game or going for a walk. You'll want to avoid taking your child's behavior personally. I know this can be tough when they kind of do triggering things. Like maybe, for example, you've told them time again not to come up from behind and they do. Again, children are still learning. Even if you've told them once, they might not understand why that is so important or impactful for you. So trying to kind of explain it again, and realizing that they're not doing it to intentionally trigger or make your PTSD worse. Take good care of yourself and then seek mental health care if needed. And just some final thoughts on the next slide. Thank you so much for taking the time to attend this workshop. I know that all of you really do care and love your children, and just by being here, I can really see that. And hopefully you'll leave kind of knowing that you aren't alone in dealing with PTSD as a parent. If you feel distressed or experiencing significant PTSD symptoms, we do really strongly encourage you to seek professional personal help. I hope, as you heard today, we do have a lot of treatments that can make your PTSD significantly better, and get you back to living the life that you want to live. We do have the Veterans Crisis number, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can call that at any time. You can text 838255 or online chat at veteranscrisisline.net too, if those are more comfortable mediums for you. There's also supportive resources and video testimonials on maketheconnection.net. I said this at the top of the presentation, but I do have some books and websites that are helpful. Hopefully there's a way maybe that we can get these slides to you. I don't know if I can I'll share my email too. If you're interested in the slides, you can email me and I will be happy to send them to you. But there are some books and websites that you can use that might be helpful as you have this discussion. I think we have a couple minutes for questions if I'm reading the time right. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Yeah, we do have about 10-15 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat for Jessica. And I'm going to put 2 links in the chat. One of them is a survey for this presentation, and another one is a link to go back to the closing general session. So feel free to fill out the survey if you'd like. We'd really appreciate it. And then as far as the slides, I can definitely put the slides on the website for this event, which is arizonacoalition.org/2021 PTSD Summit. And there's that link. So yeah, and all the breakout sessions are being recorded, and we'll post them on this website as well. So if there's another session that you couldn't join and you wanted to see it, you can definitely view it later. But again, if you have any questions or anything, please feel free to put them in the chat for Dr. Wertz to answer. And yeah, by the way, great job, Dr. Wertz. This was fantastic.
Oh, good. Thank you. Hopefully it was helpful for people.
I know we talked about this earlier, right now the slide is books for children about PTSD and all that stuff. This next slide is a few websites as well. If anyone wants to write these down or anything like that.
Yeah, the Sesame Street Workshop is on there, like I mentioned. There's a military parenting website that was designed by the military family experts. There's some veteran parenting toolkits. And then the last websites are more geared just in general for parenting. So there's their American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry family page. There's Center for Disease Control's information for parents. PBS has some good parenting websites, as well as the American Academy of Pediatrics. But out of all these, I do really strongly recommend, I know I keep bringing this up, the Sesame Street one's really great. They've just got a lot of different videos. They've got a lot of like coloring worksheets that you can print out for kids. They have like little like online games that children can play that, you know, help them understand, you know, PTSD, deployment, you know, having to move around a lot, how to express emotions. So that's a really good one.